Shortly before his passing, in a moment of deep silence and surrounded by only 3 trusted confidants, Padre Pio revealed a spiritual insight not found in sermons, not recorded in journals, and never shared in confessionals. This wasn't folklore, nor was it a common prayer. It was something sacred, something lived, a principle so simple and yet so profound that he hesitated before passing it on. For decades, this secret remained hidden, passed quietly from one soul to another until the moment was right for it to be revealed. And that moment is now. As you listen to these words, thousands of ordinary people across the globe are quietly experiencing profound change, not by luck or chance, but by understanding a spiritual law that has long been ignored. People just like you, a retired grandmother in New Mexico who suddenly found herself debt-free, or a young man in South Africa who started a business from what seemed like thin air, are stepping into financial freedom, not through schemes or superstition, but by practicing something deeply aligned with faith and simplicity. And it all begins with what they do in the first moments of their day. Padre Pio understood, perhaps better than anyone of his time, the silent war being waged against abundance. He knew that what we experience financially is not solely the result of market forces or bad luck. Behind every repeated struggle, behind every almost that slips away, there is often a spiritual barricade, one invisible to the eye, but deeply felt in the soul. And it was precisely to break that barricade that Padre Pio performed a daily act of devotion, an act so unassuming that most wouldn't give it a second thought. Yet it has proven to be a turning point in the lives of those who follow his footsteps, literally. This isn't about luck, it's not about superstition, it's about spiritual law, one that governs more of your material reality than you might imagine. Padre Pio believed that divine abundance was meant for all children of God, and he also knew that many were cut off from it by invisible chains, chains formed by fear, generational trauma, spiritual attack, or even ancestral patterns of scarcity. But he also knew those chains could be broken, and he left us a tool to do just that. Think about how many times you've come close to something better, only to feel it vanish like sand through your fingers. Have you ever felt like no matter how hard you work, something unseen pulls you back? That isn't just misfortune. Padre Pio called this the theft of grace, when dark forces intercept blessings before they reach you. But there is a way to reclaim what is yours. And that begins by acknowledging that the unseen has real power, and that faith, when focused with purpose, becomes a force stronger than any blockade. For Padre Pio, this began at his feet. Every morning before stepping out, he would prepare something special, not a relic, not a holy medal, though he used those too, but a small, sacred practice rooted in the very nature of how we walk through life. He believed the feet were spiritual instruments, antennas that send and receive energy from the ground below and the heavens above. And he believed that what touched your feet could influence your destiny. So every day, he placed something specific in his right shoe, as both shield and invitation. During the hardest years of the Second World War, when Italy was drowning in poverty and fear, people would flock to Padre Pio, seeking answers, healing, and provision. And while many received prayers and comfort, a few, often those most desperate, were given something else. A folded piece of paper, a few words of instruction, a leaf or a symbol. And within days, sometimes hours, things began to shift. Debts were forgiven, food appeared, jobs materialized. These weren't lucky breaks, they were shifts in spiritual alignment. And they all began with a sacred action that started from the ground up. What exactly did he do? What was placed in that shoe? And why has this never been widely taught until now? The truth is, the spiritual elite have always protected this kind of knowledge, not to hoard it, but to preserve its power. Because when spiritual truth becomes commercialized, it loses its essence. Padre Pio shared this practice only with those he believed would use it with reverence. And now, in times of growing spiritual and economic warfare, that reverence is needed more than ever. This isn't about escaping hardship, it's about walking through it with divine authority. One of his closest followers once asked Padre Pio why, if he had the power to heal and perform miracles, he still used physical objects in his devotions. Padre Pio smiled gently and replied, "The sacraments are physical. Bread is physical. Water is physical. The cross is wood. God moves through matter because what is unseen must pass through what is seen." That's why this practice isn't about the item itself, but about what it represents. It becomes a bridge from belief to manifestation, from promise to reality. So imagine yourself tomorrow morning placing something meaningful inside your shoe, walking not with anxiety or doubt, but with quiet certainty. Each step you take sends a signal, not to the market, not to the economy, but to the divine realms that govern unseen movement. And as you align your physical journey with your spiritual intention, things begin to shift, slowly at first, subtly, but undeniably. You may be skeptical, and that's okay. Faith often begins where logic ends, but ask yourself this: what if you've been blocked all these years, not by what you could or couldn't do, but by what you couldn't see? And what if there was a way to clear the path without spending a cent? Only your faith, your intention, your heart. That's what Padre Pio wanted us to know. That's what he whispered to the few. And that's what is now reaching you right on time. You are not powerless. You are not cursed. You are not forgotten. There is a deeper economy at work, one not ruled by interest rates or inflation, but by alignment with divine order. The step-by-step practice we will soon uncover is not a hack, not a loophole. It is a recalibration, a reconnection, a way to restore your birthright as a child of providence. And as you walk with that awareness, life responds. Let this be the beginning of a new kind of journey for you, one marked not by chasing money, but by attracting provision through spiritual clarity. It's time to reclaim what was lost, to rewire what was broken, and to remember what has been waiting for you all along. And it starts, quite literally, with where you plant your feet. As Padre Pio often said in whispers, heard only by the spiritually attentive, the soul feels what the eyes cannot see. And so it was with the small package he placed in his shoe every day. It wasn't just an object, it was a declaration, a contract with heaven, a spiritual GPS that rerouted his daily path away from obstacles and toward divine appointments. And this was not something limited to him alone. This practice, though once hidden, was meant to be shared with those willing to walk in faith, not fear. Throughout the years, stories surfaced, quietly at first, of people who had been given access to this method and used it. A woman in rural Argentina who'd been told by doctors that she would lose her home due to mounting medical bills found just days after using the sacred ritual. A distant cousin willing to pay off her mortgage. Not because of luck, but because something shifted. The energy around her began to align with grace. She later wrote, "It was as if God saw me again for the first time in years." Another testimony came from a man in the Philippines, an out-of-work father of 4. He learned of the method through a nun who had been close to a priest trained under one of Padre Pio's spiritual sons. Reluctantly, skeptically, he followed the instructions. On the 11th day, he received a call from an old employer who offered him a better position than he had before. He wept not because of the money, but because of the timing. "I had prayed for help, but I didn't know how to listen. This practice taught me to expect God's movement." The key wasn't the object itself, but the combination of faith, focus, and intention. Padre Pio always stressed this point. Without intention, the action is empty. Without faith, the energy dissolves. Without spiritual alignment, the motion is mechanical. That's why this method has been quietly powerful. It filters out those who seek magic and attracts those who seek meaning. And those are the people who see the real results. People like you, who are tired of repeating the same financial patterns, tired of watching dreams die slow deaths, tired of surviving when you were born to live. Padre Pio's practice was rooted in something the modern world has forgotten: reverence. Everything he did with awe. He didn't take his routine lightly. That's why he chose specific objects, prayed specific words, and timed his movements with purpose. It wasn't superstition, it was alignment with heaven. And what we're about to explore now is how you can do the same, from your home, starting today, with nothing more than a few simple items and a heart that believes. The object he used most often: a natural item rich in ancient spiritual meaning, a bay leaf. Not any bay leaf, but 3, whole and unbroken, wrapped in a small note bearing a prayer of release. The symbolism is immense. In ancient times, bay leaves crowned the victorious. In sacred texts, they signified protection. Their fragrance was believed to clear spiritual residue from spaces and bodies alike. Padre Pio wasn't interested in tradition for its own sake. He used these items because of what they attracted and repelled in the spiritual realm. 3 leaves. Why 3? Because in the sacred geometry of faith, 3 is not a number, it is a vibration. Father, Son, Holy Spirit. Past, present, future. Mind, body, soul. Padre Pio believed the number 3 opened a spiritual portal that allowed divine intervention to enter one's everyday life. When those 3 leaves were prayed over, they ceased being plants and became instruments, channels, keys. Then came the written prayer. Padre Pio didn't believe in memorizing long recitations. He believed in focused declarations, heartfelt and personal. That's why the prayer he instructed was short but intentional, written in blue ink on pure white paper, blue for faith, white for clarity. He instructed followers to fold the paper 3 times, place the leaves inside, and press it to their chest before putting it in their right shoe. Always the right, because it symbolizes your forward path, your destiny, your alignment with what lies ahead, not behind. And here is where the transformation begins. When you walk with this sacred symbol underfoot, you are not walking alone. You are activating a spiritual field around you that changes what you attract. You are no longer moving through life blindly. You are walking with divine authority, and everything around you begins to respond. People report sudden clarity of mind, unexpected solutions to old problems, new doors opening without force. The world doesn't change, your resonance does. And what is meant for you begins to find its way. Padre Pio warned, however, that this practice requires one thing above all: consistency. Not because God demands it, but because the process of spiritual cleansing takes time, 21 days to be exact. 3 cycles of 7. Each week a spiritual layer is peeled back. In the first, resistance breaks. In the second, flow begins. In the third, opportunities come into form. You may feel lighter, more certain, or even emotionally raw. That is part of the purification. Do not resist it. Let it come. You are being restored. And once the 21 days are complete, the bay leaves must be retired, not tossed, but respectfully released. Burn them, Padre Pio taught. Return them to the earth as ash, for what has been consecrated must be honored in its departure. Then, if your spirit calls you to continue, begin again. Many do, not out of fear, but out of gratitude. Because when the light starts flowing, the soul remembers how it feels to live without chains. Now, if you've stayed with me until here, I know something about you. You're ready. Ready to stop surviving and begin walking in a rhythm of faith. Ready to reclaim not just money but meaning, not just provision but peace. So here's what I ask you to do. If something in your heart is stirring right now, if there's a voice inside you whispering, "This is for me," then take a moment and subscribe to this channel. Not because I need numbers, but because you need reminders. You need to stay connected to this spiritual current, to this community of people walking with purpose. And leave a comment below, not just any comment, I want you to write one word that feels right for you. A word that carries the energy of what you want to receive in this next cycle. Don't overthink it. Let it come from within. Maybe it's freedom, maybe it's clarity, maybe it's restoration. Whatever it is, speak it into the space. And when you see someone else's word, bless it silently. That's how we amplify this field of transformation together. Because this is not a performance, this is a movement. And every movement begins with a single step. Some people report small changes in the first week of using Padre Pio's ritual. Parking spots opening up, calls returned after months of silence, random smiles from strangers that feel like tiny nudges from the divine. Others report larger shifts, debts forgiven, unexpected job offers, inheritance claims suddenly processed after years of limbo. But the common thread in every testimony is not the size of the blessing, it's the clarity that comes with it. It's as if the noise of fear and doubt begins to fade, and a deeper voice, the one you haven't heard in years, begins to speak again. That voice is your soul, remembering what it's like to live aligned with divine provision. Take Luciana, a single mother of two in Lisbon. She was living in a cramped apartment, surviving on 2 part-time jobs, one of which she knew would end soon. She stumbled across the method while searching for prayers for financial help. At first, she felt foolish. "Leaves in my shoes?" she asked aloud. But she felt a pull to try. On day 14, she received an email from a company she had applied to over a year ago. Not only had they reopened the role, but the manager who interviewed her remembered her by name and offered her the job, remote, with a stable income and benefits. She said it wasn't just the job that changed her life, it was the feeling that God hadn't forgotten her. Padre Pio understood something that many spiritual leaders talk about, but few explain deeply. Your relationship with money is not just emotional or practical, it's spiritual. It's rooted in how you see yourself. If you walk every day believing you are a burden or that there's never enough, your energy becomes a magnet for scarcity. Not because you deserve it, but because your spirit has forgotten how to receive. This ritual, simple as it is, begins to reverse that. It invites your nervous system, your aura, your subconscious, to remember that provision is your birthright. Another woman, Maria Helena, from Porto Alegre, told her story during a prayer gathering. She had been in deep depression after losing her shop during the pandemic. She barely spoke. Someone close to her prepared the leaves and the prayer on her behalf and placed them under her bed, since she wasn't even leaving the house. On the 7th night, she had a dream where Padre Pio walked into her home, looked at her and said, "Come, the light is not far." She woke up weeping. That morning, for the first time in months, she stood up, got dressed, and left the house. 2 weeks later, she was working again, not in retail, but helping the elderly in her neighborhood. She now says, "I didn't find a new job, I found myself." This is the real power of the method. It's not a shortcut to cash. It's not a formula to manipulate divine favor. It's a reset, a return to the original rhythm between you and heaven. Padre Pio taught that poverty, when imposed by darkness, is a lie whispered over the lives of the faithful. And the greatest tragedy isn't the poverty itself. It's when we believe the lie and stop asking for more, stop expecting miracles, stop praying with hope. That's why the ritual begins at the feet, because that's where most people stop. They stop walking, they stop believing. But when your feet move again, so does heaven. Carlos Eduardo, a taxi driver in Madrid, said it plainly, "After a week with the leaves in my shoe, I stopped feeling like I was chasing money and started feeling like money was chasing me." He wasn't speaking in metaphors. He began getting longer rides, higher tips, repeat customers who asked specifically for him. But again, it wasn't the money, it was what came with it: dignity, energy, joy. As he said, "I started driving like I had a purpose again." Another powerful outcome many people report is spiritual clarity. After the 2nd or 3rd week of using the ritual, they begin to see things differently. Patterns become obvious. Suddenly, They recognized that certain relationships were draining them, that some financial opportunities were actually traps, that the shame they carried from childhood was tied to beliefs that weren't even theirs. Padre Pio often said, "The light of heaven casts shadows on what you must leave behind." And that's what happens when you begin walking with sacred intention. What no longer serves you becomes uncomfortable to carry. There's also a hidden blessing to this practice that few expect: protection. When you walk with these consecrated leaves, you don't just attract abundance, you repel envy, spiritual interference, and subtle curses passed down unconsciously from generation to generation. Many families carry what Padre Pio called chains of silence, unspoken agreements with scarcity. Perhaps your grandparents struggled, perhaps your parents struggled, and perhaps now you believe struggle is simply your destiny. But Padre Pio didn't accept that. He believed that one awakened soul could break the entire chain for those who came before and those yet to be born. That's why the ritual includes prayer. That's why the objects must be consecrated. Because when you step into this method, you're not doing it just for yourself. You're standing as a spiritual bridge for your bloodline. You're saying, the cycle ends here. You become the one who interrupts the pattern, and from you, a new pattern begins. Take a moment and breathe that in. What if this isn't just about getting out of debt or finding a better job? What if this is about realignment, about stepping back into your original design, the one heaven wrote before the world taught you to fear, to doubt, to shrink? Padre Pio didn't just want people to be healed, he wanted them to be whole, to remember that they were chosen not for suffering, but for sacred work, and that sacred work requires resources. As the final days of the 21-day cycle approach, many people describe a shift in their home atmosphere, a sense of peace, a deeper sleep, children who laugh more, partners who argue less. It's not a spell, it's not mysticism, it's the natural effect of walking in harmony. And when harmony returns, everything around it finds its rightful place. That's why Padre Pio used to say, when the soul is clear, the world becomes transparent. You begin to see opportunities not just as luck, but as guidance. You begin to walk through doors not just because they're open, but because you know who opened them. And so, if you're walking with this sacred tool and you're beginning to feel the pull of something larger, trust it. The discomfort is part of the shift. The resistance is proof that something is moving. And the small blessings are just the beginning. Greater clarity, greater peace, greater provision await those who stay the course. The ritual doesn't end after 21 days. It evolves. It becomes your rhythm, your prayer in motion. There's a moment, somewhere near the end of the 21 days, when something internal shifts. It's hard to describe, but easy to recognize. It's as if the weight you didn't know you were carrying begins to lift, as if something inside you straightens its posture and dares to believe again. Not in a fantasy, not in a quick fix, but in a future that's finally unfolding with light. This is when many people say they stop trying to make things happen and start allowing things to happen. The ritual doesn't lose power with time. It becomes part of you. A sacred habit, a quiet declaration, I walk with heaven beneath my feet. People like Teresa in London, who had nearly given up on her art, began to create again. She didn't win the lottery. She didn't suddenly find fame. But a gallery owner stumbled upon her work online, offered her a small exhibition, and from that came steady commissions. Not millions, but momentum. Not magic, but meaning. Teresa says, "What changed wasn't just my income. What changed was that I no longer felt invisible." Or João, in rural Brazil, who had spent years in bitterness after a business failure. He used the ritual quietly, didn't tell anyone. By the second cycle, he found himself forgiving people he hadn't spoken to in decades. Soon after, he was approached by a younger entrepreneur who asked to buy his land for a fair price and invited him to act as a mentor in a new agricultural project. João didn't just recover financially, He rediscovered his purpose. This is the unseen work of Padre Pio's wisdom. It doesn't just restore finances, it restores dignity, connection, mission. Because what good is wealth without peace? What good is a full wallet and an empty soul? That's why this practice touches so many areas of life. It's not about becoming rich, it's about becoming whole. And so, if you've come this far and if something within you has stirred, this is your sign, not a coincidence, not a lucky click, a sign that perhaps it's time to stop living as if you were made for scraps and start living as someone created for more, created with purpose, provision, direction. And now I have a final request, not as a content creator, but as someone walking this journey with you. If this video spoke to you, if something in these words felt like they were already yours, then I invite you, subscribe to this channel. But don't do it out of habit. Do it as a commitment, a step of alignment. Let it be your silent agreement with the divine. I'm ready. And in the comments, don't just leave a word this time. Tell us your story. Where are you walking from? What are you hoping to walk into? What has this message stirred in you that you haven't shared with anyone yet? We read these stories, we pray over them, and most importantly, we build this community with them. Because this is not about going viral, it's about going deeper. It's not about collecting subscribers, it's about gathering believers. People like you, who are tired of surface-level solutions and who are ready to walk with intention, with faith, and with quiet fire in their steps. If this message helped you, share it. Not like a link, but like a gift. You never know who is praying for a sign and might receive this video as their answer. Be that bridge, be that light. And if you feel called to repeat the 21-day practice, don't hesitate. Each cycle takes you deeper. Each day peels back another layer. Let's walk this together. You, me, Padre Pio, and thousands of others awakening to a new rhythm, one of clarity, courage, and divine provision. Welcome home.